I get why some people aren't into traveling. Long flights crammed in a middle seat, overpriced hotels that smell like smoke, and being miles away from the city center. None of that screams dream vacation. Now, I'm past the days of budget airlines and sketchy motels, but I'm also not flying first class with seats that lay down or staying in luxurious hotels in the city center that leave chocolates on the pillows. Financial independence has given me the freedom to enjoy travel with simple comforts, and I'm perfectly happy in the Goldilocks zone. But what if, once a year, you could take a truly glamorous vacation without spending anything extra? In today's episode, I'm joined by Chris Hutchins, host of All the Hacks. He shares practical travel tips to help you take those bucket list vacations. Chris has earned tens of millions of points, traveled all over the world, and has even took a 7-month trip with his wife, spending just $30 a day on average. Chris is a total travel savant, and he has a hack for just about everything travel related. I do have to admit though, I went in this conversation a little skeptical. I thought it might sound like a part-time job, chasing sign-up bonuses, juggling credit cards, and spending hours hunting for deals. But I was surprised by how simple many of Chris's tips are and how much money they could save. Some of his hacks don't even involve points and miles, just smart ways to get upgrades and better deals. I'm excited to try these out and travel more luxuriously without spending more. And I'm guessing you are too. So buckle up and enjoy my conversation with Mr. All the Hacks himself, Chris Hutchins. Most of the FI community loves to travel, but we're also frugal, or at least want to get the most value for our money that we possibly can.
Efficient, I like to call
Yes, efficient. So I had this question, how do I plan an amazing vacation without spending a fortune? And I started to go look for who is the best person to help me solve this problem? And I could not avoid your content. You kept coming up over and over and over again. So I'm really excited to tackle this topic together.
There are probably a lot of people that like to travel hack and financial independence. Those are two passions, but I don't know if anyone probably is public in both worlds. So I'm glad we're going to do this.
So you're on your show, All the Hacks. It's all about finding tips and strategies to help improve your life. And of course, travel is a huge section. I think you mentioned it's probably a third of your content that's out there. A lot of the hacks that you share involve some kind of hustle or effort, which I think is totally fine. But sometimes hacks, I think, can go too far. Is there a tactic that you've been doing for a while that you recently realized just isn't worth your time or effort?
I don't know if I want to go too far off the deep end now, but I'm coming around on the idea that using credit card points and miles in the travel portal is not always as bad of a deal as I think when you first get into points and miles, you're told it is. And so I almost booked a flight today using the portal which by the way, unlocks travel in a much better way. Every flight is available per se. But I think I always just assumed we were only going to use points and miles. And now I'm there might be ways to book flights without having to go through some of the hassle. The old me was willing to do anything to get the best deal. And the new me is willing to do some things, but we have 2 kids, we're going to fly direct. And so just yesterday, I went down this rabbit hole of, I found this amazing deal from Vancouver to Frankfurt. And we're trying to get from San Francisco to Switzerland. And it's that's a piece of the puzzle and you could make it all work. But at this point in my life and with the points we have and the lifestyle we live, I don't want to buy a ticket to Vancouver, then change to another airline, then get to Frankfurt, then take a train. And it just felt like I was putting myself through a lot more work. And so maybe the thing I stopped doing is these ridiculous, at all costs, best deal things.
That's fair. Yeah, I've heard you talk about balancing the maximizer and the satisficer combo and trying to lean a little bit closer to that. Can you explain a little bit of the difference between the two?
Yes. In general, you could find the best thing or you could find a thing that works, very 80-20 Pareto principle. And it turns out satisficers are happier with their decisions. And maximizers are not as happy, even though they come to better outcomes. So when you maximize, this is, a rule of averages. It's not every time, but when you maximize, you will get a better outcome than the satisficer, but you will actually be less satisfied with it. And I think this became really apparent to me. We were going to Greece and we were going to Santorini and there were 5 hotels that all sit on the beautiful cliffs looking out over the water. And, they're all very, very similar. They were similarly priced. And my wife and I were trying to pick them. And we were going through the nuance of every TripAdvisor review, trying to figure out which of these hotels would actually be the best experience. And the answer was all of them. Every single one of those hotels would have left us with a great experience. And whether one of them had like taller shower heads or like, it was down to the point that the things we were looking at were things we didn't even care about. And so I am envious of people who can get to a point and just say, all right, we don't need the best thing. And I'm trying to get better at that. And one of the ways I do it is I just take a break. And instead of say, am I done? I don't say I'm done. I go on a walk, and maybe on the walk, I'll realize I'm done. So instead of trying to convince myself I'm over it, I try to break the process up and hope that that will lead me to the conclusion I want.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. Well, now that I've had you like kind of reposition this conversation, I think, and I do want to carry like this optimization aspect into our conversation about how to kind of get the most out of a really awesome trip, but also recognize that the FI community also doesn't need to overextend to save $1 or $2 here or there. But let's kind of like start to jump into a couple of the big categories around travel. And first, I think, is flights. I think one of the most obvious and easy things that I've heard you share as a tip or a hack is booking positioning flights. Can you talk a little bit about that and how someone might effectively do something like that?
Yeah, so let's think about where you're trying to go on a vacation. If you want to find deals on flights, and you need to go next week, well, the ability to use points and miles really depends on what you have, because you're probably not going to rack up enough points and miles to make that work. So I think positioning flights are important to understand in the context of using points and miles mostly. And that's because there are lots of airlines all over the world, and not all of them are partners. And so if I want to go from San Francisco to Santorini, is actually a really perfect example. I am only going to find a flight from San Francisco to Santorini if an airline flies that entire route within its network of partners. So I might find a Lufthansa flight from San Francisco to Frankfurt and Frankfurt to Santorini. I might find a United plus Aegean Air, because they're all in Star Alliance, from like San Francisco to London to Athens to Santorini. But the easiest flight may, and I'm not saying it is, but it may be San Francisco to Milan. I don't even think there is a Milan flight, but San Francisco to Rome, and then a short flight from Rome to Santorini. But that Rome to Santorini flight is not operated by a carrier that has any relationship with the San Francisco to Rome flight. And so it'll never show up when you search for it. That's true if you're searching for points and miles. That's also often true with cash. Google Flights is getting slightly better at letting you see tickets where flights are separated, but often it's like the one way there and the one way home, not separated throughout the trip. Similarly, if you live in, not a major metro area and you're looking to book a flight to Europe, let's say you live in Redding, California. I think Redding, California, maybe only United flies to Redding, California. I'm not 100% sure, but I think. So if you're going to look, I want to go from Reading to London. Well, you're only going to find flights that are partnered with United. Whereas if you looked from San Francisco to London, you would find Virgin Atlantic and British Airways and United. And so the idea is, don't be searching for flights from smaller airports as part of your search, because you might end up finding that flight from Reading to San Francisco is $100, and then the British Airways flight from San Francisco to London is a third of the price of the United flight, and you could save a lot of money. Now, the flip side is sometimes it's actually cheaper to fly to these cities. So I'm not saying never do that search, but I would probably say if you want to go from California to Europe, you could kind of search from San Francisco and LA to Europe, and then also search from your home city and see which one's better. And buying those separate positioning flights can save a lot.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different options that I think you have there, from piggybacking on a large flight across ocean and then doing a regional carrier or local carrier in that country. Or even if you're in between multiple airports, your driving distance to multiple airports, you can look via that.
Oh, for sure. Like, I always search all 3 Bay Area airports. If I didn't live so close to the big airports, I would add Sacramento or add Sonoma, but I just, rarely have I ever seen those flights be cheaper. But for a big family trip where it's like your annual big thing, definitely consider oh, well, what if we just bought a cheap Southwest flight to Las Vegas and we found an amazing deal out of Las Vegas?
Especially the benefit of the FI community is so many also have the option of slow traveling, which we'll probably get into later in the conversation. But I can fly over to London, hang out there for a few days, and then go take a more specific flight to the destination I'm trying to get to. Or I could road trip 3 hours to a larger airport near me, but spend a night or two in that city that I'm headed to and kind of make an extension out of the trip that I have and save a little bit of money on the top as well.
Yeah, I mean, to use a very concrete example, if I didn't have 2 toddlers, this would be very different. But we were trying to get from the Bay Area to Europe this summer and really flexible on dates. And we're at a point where the number of miles we have has kind of put us into the camp of always fly business class over an ocean, never pay full price and try to use points every time. Now, the funny thing is, I would find it an incredible deal if I could find business class flights probably anywhere under 100,000 points each way. And in a lot of the travel portals, if you have an Amex Business Platinum or a Chase Sapphire Reserve, you can get like a 1.5 cents per point. So if I'm willing to spend upwards of 200,000 points, that is the equivalent of a $3,000 plane ticket. And so I thought, well, I might as well look, right? Like, what happens if there's a deal? Or what happens if it's more convenient, right? Like, the miles and points might send me through New York and London and this, but I could buy a direct flight for $3,000, which is effectively the same number of points. Let's set aside the fact that when you buy that flight in the portal with dollars, you actually earn points on that flight also. So that'll subsidize the cost further. And I noticed that there was this flight. Honestly, I don't know how I found it, but I did. I think I was just searching all the West Coast airports and I added Vancouver. And there was a flight, round trip, Vancouver to Frankfurt, almost every day this summer, depending on when this comes out, might still be there. Only if you book it through WestJet. But the flight was on Condor. But if you booked it from Condor, it was super expensive. But if you booked it on WestJet, fully refundable, business class fare, round trip for $1,700.
Oof.
Now, $1,700 for round trip lie flat business from the West Coast to Europe is probably the lowest non-mistake fare I've ever seen. So we thought, should we just book this like right now? And we were like, gosh, we got to get to Vancouver, right? Like then we got to change planes. Then we've got to get from Frankfurt to where we ultimately want to go. Had we not had kids, I would have booked it immediately. Like it was definitely the best deal. And if you wanted to book that, you know, if you convert it and back out to what the points equivalent would have been at $1.50 cents, that's like, you know, 120,000 points round trip. Amazing deal. But if you're financially independent and you have lots of time, maybe you go to Vancouver for a couple days. Vancouver in the summer is awesome. It's gorgeous. Maybe you go up to Whistler, you know, like a lot of great options. Maybe instead of trying to get to Switzerland, you go to, you know, spend some time in Germany and you kind of slow trek through Germany, take some trains here and there. You know, it's only 3 or 4 hours by train to Switzerland. So you could make that work. Now, if you have a more limited window and you have 2 kids that are under 5, maybe that's not the kind of trip you want this time. And so ultimately, we did what I would say is the second biggest hack in this whole space is we just set an alert. It blew my mind that it happened so fast. But last night I said, you know what? We're not going to do that. I'm going to go and I'm going to set alerts for direct flights from San Francisco to Europe with 4 seats in business, 100,000 or less points a person, and we'll see what happens. We're recording this in April. I assumed sometime between April and June, something would open up. Sure enough, literally the next morning, today, SFO direct to Frankfurt popped up, 70,000 points, also on Condor, booked it right away, you know, within minutes of it popping up, and now we have a direct flight. Is that going to be more expensive than the other one? Yes. Is it going to be way less hassle for us? Also, yes. But those alerts are fantastic because this inventory changes every single day, every single hour, every single minute. And a lot of the tools online make it super easy, which makes it so much easier for us to get the most out of our points and miles.
Can you go through the instructions on how you set that alert up and what you used for that?
Yeah, so there are a handful of tools. I did an episode, I wish I remembered the number, on the best award search tools. Ones I like are Points Yeah, Award Tool, Seats.Aero, Expert Flyer a bit, but I'd say it's probably like a little bit more technical, but so is Seats.Aero. In this case, I actually set the alert up on 3 different tools because I was like, not only do I want to run the experiment of finding the flights, but I want to run the experiment of who finds the inventory. In this case, it was a service called Seats.Aero, but in all of them, it's pretty much the same. You go in and you say, I want to create an alert from X origination to destination over, these dates. willing to look at these partners under this fare and alert me. Almost all the time, these alerts are pro paid features. So I think depending on the platform, it's probably going to cost anywhere from, $10 a month to maybe $75 a year, $100 a year. That's kind of the range of prices. But I would play with all the tools. Most of them are free to use in some capacity. Find the one you like and then set an alert up there. And, assuming you've played the points and miles game and have the points to take the trip, it would not surprise me if you could actually get the exact dates you want, or plus or minus a few days. It's all about flexibility. That could be flexible with when you book. That could be flexible with what days you go, with where you go, with how many stops you take. I tell friends that if I want to take this flight on this day and I don't want to make any changes, it's going to be hard to get a lot of value from your points. But if you're flexible on any one of those areas I mentioned, the more the better. I feel really good about you getting an awesome trip.
Yeah, I feel like the flexibility price alert combo was like my big takeaway for like how to really kind of maximize the value you're getting out of your flight and create this really awesome vacation.
The other one is to book incredibly far in advance. Like there are some airlines that open up space consistently, like 2 flights in business on every flight at 360 days before departure. So that's the other one, is like, if you really want a flight on a particular day, which we just also booked because we were like, we really want to go to Japan for spring break 2026, let's just book it 360 days out.
How many points do you currently have? I've heard 12 million. I've heard 16 million, I think, on a most recent. What's your current balance up to?
Probably slightly over 20 million. I mean, maybe slightly less after the redemption this morning, but last I checked, it was 21.9.
That's crazy. You're not burning fast enough,
I know. That's the problem is, with the last 4 years with 2 young kids, we haven't traveled as much.
Yeah.
And with doing a podcast where a third of the content is about points and miles full time, it's like I've both been aggressively on the earning side and unaggressively on the burning side. But I would say an international trip for a family of 4 in business class is probably well redeemed in the 400 to 800,000 point range. Probably 5 to 6 is a bit average. So yes, that that's like 40, 30 to 40 trips. But I got a lot of years left, so we gotta figure that out. I want to make sure we can take a couple trips a year, and that could be 10, 15 years of travel. But we also use them for all kinds of other trips in between the big trip of the year.
That's fair. Let's talk a little bit about how to increase your points. Let's skip some of the obvious, especially sign-up bonuses. But one of my favorites is just your point side hustles that you have. My favorite being how you became like a part-time bachelor trip booker. Yeah. Can you share a little bit of how you use bachelor trips to increase your points?
Yeah, and this works for bachelorettes too, for any women listening. The general premise is I'm always the group travel planner, right? This could work for a family reunion. This could work for a wedding. This could work for bachelor party, bachelorette party. I volunteer to take on the role of travel planner. And in return, I book all of the travel on my cards. And it turns out that some of the most lucrative bonuses that you get for spending are often in travel categories. So hotels, flights, travel. Let's take an example of a bachelor party. I'll use some round numbers. 10 people going to Mexico. And so you're going to have 10 flights. And let's say those flights are $300. So you've got $3,000 of flights, putting on a card that hopefully earns like 5x points on flights. And now you've got 15,000 points. Then you're saying, okay, well, let's book a villa. Maybe the villa's, I've been on some really extreme bachelor parties where it might be thousands and thousands of dollars. Let's say, you've got 10 people. What's reasonable? 5 hotel rooms, $1,000 a night, $2,000 a night. All of a sudden you add this up and you're like, okay, I made 30, 40,000 points. Maybe you do that a couple times a year. Maybe you plan a family reunion. You basically realize your skill is travel, but your payment mechanism is you just put it all on your card. And most people are happy to do that. Yes. They're like, I'll Venmo you the difference. If you have a friend getting married, offer to take care of all their hotel management. You'll negotiate a room block with the hotel. You'll get a discount. People can email you. You'll help coordinate who gets what room. And then oftentimes it depends on the relationship with the hotel and how they're doing the rooms. whether you are paying for them, but some hotels have these meeting planner programs where as the planner, you get a bunch of points for planning the meeting. And so I don't know. I just find that the more I'm planning travel, the more I'm getting to pay for travel. And the more you can find people that spend a lot on travel, the better. I have one friend who has a very large budget from his company, and he's like, hey, can you book this trip? I'm going here, and it's going to be like $20,000 of flights. And he's totally fine if I put him on my card. So $20,000 of flights on a 5X card, that's 100,000 points. That's one person, to depending on how efficient you are, probably anywhere in the world.
I love it. It's so fun. And I think you have a whole episode, like 25 ways to get more points without spending any money. Do you know the episode number off the top of your head?
It's 50 ways to earn more points without, I think it was 50 plus even. And I don't know the episode off the top of my head. We can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
But the best way to get points is to spend money. And if you don't spend a lot of money, then you either need to get creative or spend someone else's money. So a lot of the examples I gave before are, how can you spend someone else's money? How can you volunteer to do things that are really high leverage for spending money? On the flip side, there are so many ways of everything from taking a survey to booking through the right platform. Like JetBlue, I think, has a platform where if you book your Turo through JetBlue, you get some extra points. And so I just tried to break down every possible way there is to earn points that doesn't involve putting money on your card, because that's a constraint that a lot of us have. Now, the flip side of that is those constraints can go away. I'm starting to realize, especially as a business owner, like everything you spend money on can be put on a card at some cost. And so then the question is the cost worth it? As a person without a business, okay, you can put your taxes on your credit card and pay 1.75%. If you're earning 1 Delta point for 1.75% fee, I don't think that's worth it. If you're earning a 250,000 point sign-up bonus you couldn't get otherwise, I think it's totally worth it. So if you have a 3% cashback card and you're going to pay a 1.75% fee, well, that seems great too. But if you're running a business and that 1.75% fee is a tax deductible business expense, well, then it's depending on your tax rate, like it could be as low as 0.9%, which is a fee I'd pay on almost any card. If someone offered me to run a credit card and just get the cash for less than 1%, 100% of my cards would be maxed out 100% of the time.
I love it. We'll put that episode in the show notes if you're looking for other creative ways. But let's move on to hotels. And I think one of the easiest and most brilliant hacks that you gave led to one of your listeners getting embroidered pillows.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about how that came to be and what the hack really is?
Ultimately, hotels are in the hospitality game, right? Like this seems so obvious, but I think people overlook it a lot. And this is also true of airlines. Family member of mine recently was traveling. They lost their bags and they were trying to figure out what to do. And I looked at their reservation. I was like, you guys didn't even have your airline frequent flyer numbers on. People want to help you when they think that you want to give them a chance to be, kind of like a loyal partner. The general principle here is anytime you are booking a hotel, book it with the hotel group. Don't book it on Priceline, Kayak, all those things. Hotels hate those companies for the most part. They give them, and they love them because they drive them a lot of business, but they don't treat the travelers coming from them as travelers who have as much likelihood of becoming loyal travelers. So you book directly with a hotel or through some travel agency that has relationships with hotels, and you put in a a hotel loyalty guest number, those kinds of things. But you reach out to the hotel and you say, hey, we're coming to stay with you. We're really excited. If you're celebrating something, tell them you're celebrating something. Like, let them know that you're investing time into the relationship with that hotel. And this seems so silly, but I can't tell you the hundreds of emails I've gotten about all the positive things that have happened by doing that. Room upgrades, free food, free champagne, free tours. Someone came in and they decorated their room in balloons and stuff for their kid's birthday. Like, hotels love going above and beyond. In a world with so much social media, they love the doing things that necessarily, might go viral and, all that kind of stuff. And so reach out to the hotel. Tell them what's happening. I wouldn't lie about it. I wouldn't every time you check in be like, we're on our honeymoon. Like, I don't like that. But if you are on your honeymoon, I would absolutely email the hotel. I'd follow up 3 or 4 days before you check in and say, hey, just a reminder, we're coming in. We're so excited. We just got married 2 days ago. It's really exciting. It would blow my mind if you consistently executed on this and more than half of the time you weren't treated to something. whether it was an upgrade or free parking or free breakfast or something like that.
Yeah, I need to start using that. My girlfriend would absolutely love that if there was like a cookie waiting for her or anything, bottle of wine, drink tickets. It just seems like an easy ask and it wouldn't take very long to do. And it's worth the reward if it's, 50% shot. Don't tell the restaurant it's your birthday every time you go just to get a free piece of cake. Like, come on. But at the same time, you're typically celebrating something almost every time you travel. So let them know and see what happens.
I agree. And it doesn't have to be something crazy. This is the first trip we've taken with our kids. Our daughter just learned to read. Like, whatever the thing that you're celebrating is, we just haven't been able to get away for a year, and it's the first time we're getting away. Let the hotel know that they have an opportunity to tie a special memory in your life to their hotel. And in their minds, they think, wow, you're going to Hawaii. You're staying at the Grand Wailea. And now they could create this magical memory, and you might go back to the Grand Wailea every year for the rest of your life. That is a possibility. And they would love to try to make that happen. You might tell your friends how amazing that hotel is. Hotels live and die on so much of this stuff. They want your positive review, your positive recommendation, your word of mouth. Give them that chance. When you go book on TripAdvisor, they might not even know who you are until the day you check in. They know you came from a platform that was much more about comparison than conscious choice, even though it might have been, right? You might have just happened to book through that channel. And look, if TripAdvisor is 40% off, go book there. Don't pay a premium for the chance that you get an upgrade. If you're getting 40% off somewhere, just buy the upgrade, right? It'll probably be cheaper. But I think if all things are the same, I would always book directly. I would always reach out. If you can't find an email address online, call the front desk, say, hey, is there an email address for the manager, the front desk manager, the supervisor? Just get an email for the hotel, someone at the hotel, not someone at, Marriott corporate sales kind of thing.
That's fair. So we do this pretty frequently where we're looking on Airbnb, my girlfriend and I, she finds this villa or this loft that she's like, oh my gosh, perfect location. I love this place. We have to book it. And then I'm like, man, it's a little out of budget. Is there a way that we can book a place we're set in stone, we really want to stay in this place without having to pay Airbnb fees or things like that?
I got two things for you. So one is someone will hear this tip and they will try it thinking that I'm crazy. And they will email you or me or both of us and be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that worked. And I picked up this tip from an Airbnb host I know. They said that 50% of their reservations are negotiated. 50% of the people that book their Airbnb negotiate the price. And I started anecdotally asking people, do you negotiate your Airbnbs? I was not 50% of people do not negotiate their Airbnbs, but this person found that happens all the time. So the first step, find some explanation hey, we're looking at a bunch of Airbnbs in the neighborhood. All the other ones are 20% less, but we really love your place. If you'd be willing to do it for this 20% less price, we'd be happy to book it right now. I'm not going to say it will work every time. And if you're trying to book in the middle of a major event and it's the only place left, you probably have a lot less luck. But my experience personally from listeners and from talking to a few hosts is that this is absolutely an option. The second one is Airbnb is not the only show in town, right? There's VRBO, and then there's tons of local sites that none of us would ever know off the top of our head unless we really worked in a market. But Google image search makes it possible to find these sites. So go take the image of the place you want to rent, save the image, and go do a Google image search where you re-upload that image, and Google will say, here are all the places on the internet that have an image that looks just like that. This won't always work, but we were in Paris and we saw this Airbnb that we really liked. And I tried it, and it turns out there was a local apartment rental site that had the exact same property, not a similar one, the exact same property for 30% less, presumably because it wasn't going through Airbnb and there weren't added on fees. And so I think also there must have been something going on with the currency thing because it just seemed like Airbnb, you could look up what Airbnb's host fees are and the discount was even greater than that. So that was another great option, was trying to find another place to book that place.
Yeah, I love both of those tips. I think those are both genius and super easy to do, reverse image searching or asking for a discount.
You can buy Airbnb gift cards at a discount in various places, whether it's online, whether it's just about the multiple. For example, I think for Airbnb, you'll get your travel bonus, but maybe you don't have a card that earns a lot of bonus points on travel, but maybe you do have a card that earns a ton of points on groceries. Can you go buy Airbnb gift cards at the grocery store? Maybe that's an option. I want to say that episode that I mentioned with like 50 plus tips, I believe there's at least one site. I think that maybe Delta has a partnership with Airbnb where if you book your Airbnb through the Delta link, you earn Delta miles. So at a minimum, you still pay with your credit card, you still get your credit card points, but you also might earn Delta points. So like it's all about chipping away at all of these things one at a time to try to get the price down. So if you're like, how do I save 10%? I don't think Airbnb participates in a lot of like the Rakuten cashback programs, but I know a lot of hotel chains do. And so I've regularly heard of people using Capital One Shopping, which does not require a Capital One card, right? It has nothing to do with their cards. You can sign up for Capital One Shopping, install the browser extension, start looking at hotels on certain properties, and then just wait a couple days and people get emails that are like 30% back on Hilton stays. So now they go back, they book that Hilton stay, they get their 30% back, and now they've really cut down on that price. So I really like the SaveWise website. They basically compare all of the places you can get shopping portal discounts from. So if you're like, oh, I want to buy a Peloton, I want to go stay at a Hilton, what platform is the best? And then similar to those award tools, you can set alerts. And so I think it's a pro feature. But I think on our deals page on the website, allthehacks.com/deals is a 20% off code for SaveWise. And you can basically say, hey, historically, what happens here? So great example is we were going to buy a Peloton and you could say, okay, well, Rakuten sometimes does 2x, sometimes does 6% back. So you can get 2% to 6% back. So you could say, hey, next time it's at 6% back, let me know. And I'll just wait and buy it then. And sometimes these bonuses are wild. And I just did an interview with someone and, she just stocks up on stuff like durable goods, like kids' winter clothes. She's like, well, we always buy this one jacket at REI or I forget the store. And whenever Rakuten is 38% back, I just buy next year's winter clothes. Whether it's 6 months away, 12 months away, it doesn't matter. But, sometimes you find the place you want and you look for the deal. And sometimes you find an amazing deal and you just plan in advance.
I always appreciate the layers that you put to like saving and chipping away at things. I don't know if I would like spend the complexity on things that are like $100 or less, but anytime you're like making a 4-figure purchase or above, like to think through the points that you're going to earn or the cash back that you're going to get. Can you buy a coupon like that could potentially help you out? The promo codes you could find, you even mentioned, I wasn't thinking about it, but the tax write-off, if it's a business expense, like layering in 5 or 6 different ways that you're going to get money back or save money, like ends up bringing something down from like maybe $2,000 to like $800 or something crazy like that.
Don't do this when you're trying to spend $20, right? But if you're going to buy a new washer dryer, all of a sudden you're going to spend probably $1,000+ if you want like a nice new washer dryer. Well, there are a lot of things you can be doing there. I remember we did this. I found this website. I don't even know if it's still there. I have no affiliation with them. It's called savedeals.com. And you could buy Home Depot and Lowe's coupons. And so you'd go buy a 20% off Lowe's coupon for $5 or something like that. And you could stack that with paying for the Lowe's purchase with Lowe's gift cards, going through a shopping portal, and then putting whatever isn't on the gift cards on a credit card for some points. And like all of a sudden it brought 30-40% off a major household appliance. And by the way, sometimes your county or your city has clean energy rebates where if you buy a new clothing washer dryer kind of setup, maybe they'll rebate you $200. It's like not quite there, but it's like, oh, did I just get paid to buy a new washer dryer? Because of course, you go resell your old one and like all of a sudden it's like that upgrade really wasn't as expensive as it seemed.
Let's quickly talk car rentals. And this was something I don't know why I didn't know this, but there are a couple of discount codes through memberships that are out there. Can you name a couple if people are affiliated with these, or if it maybe even makes sense to like buy a membership to get a discount code if you're going to be doing a lot of car rentals?
So when it comes to car rentals, I really like this website AutoSlash.
That episode you had with him was so good.
Yeah, so I did an episode with the founder of AutoSlash. And my general principle for interviewing people is when I'm trying to do an episode on a category, I prefer not to pick someone who's like tied in with one of the players in the category, unless I have a conversation before and I'm like, this person is not solely willing to shill their own company and is incredibly knowledgeable. The founder of AutoSlash is one of those people. And the general premise of the site is they'll go out and find you the best car rental deal. And then, or if you've already booked a car rental, you could just tell them what you paid. And then if they find a better deal, they'll send you an email. Now, what's really cool about AutoSlash is you can say, hey, give me the rates for Costco, for BJ's, for Sam's Club. And you don't have to show the cards, but they'll tell you if they find the best rate with those programs. AAA, AARP, which, by the way, you don't have to be a senior to join AARP. And sometimes between cashback portals and whatnot, it can be like as low as $5 for like 5-year membership. So I always search for the rates with those deals. And if the discount is big enough, I'll go join BJ's. I don't think there's a BJ's within 100 miles of us. Like I'm not, but if it's gonna save me $1,000 on something, which it probably won't, but if it's gonna save me $100 and a membership's $30, why not? So AutoSlash lets you search for them. A lot of websites let you search for them as well. Beyond just pricing, I know that, and I'm gonna butcher which one of these is true. So if you're really going to rent a rental car, just go listen to that episode. But I believe like Costco might include an authorized driver, like a second pat driver. There are some programs that might include a free car seat. Some, if you book with the Amex Platinum rate on Hertz, you get 4 hours of grace period to drop the car off. And so sometimes that doesn't matter. But if you land at 10 a.m. and your flight out some number of days in the future is at noon, if it's noon, maybe you just drop the car off at 10 a.m. But if it's such that like you really are going to need to rent a car for some increment of 24 hours plus 3 hours, you save a whole day rental using that the Amex Platinum rate. And so just understanding what you need, if you are always going to rent a car seat, then, there's probably a program that's the best that I'm not thinking of. But we stopped traveling with car seats and switched to the Ride Safer Travel Vest. And it's such a better experience. Though I guess if you got the car seat when you landed and you didn't have to travel with it, that's an even better experience. Yeah. So maybe I stand corrected here, but I like to bring the Ride Safer Vest just in case we need to take a Lyft or an Uber somewhere, and makes it a lot easier.
Fair. As we're winding up this conversation, I'd like to talk a little bit about slow travel. So you and your wife took a 6-month trip around the world where you did something crazy, like you spent $30 a day.
Yep.
Curious to know kind of how that impacted how you approach travel and kind of like what the benefit you saw through slow traveling was.
So we basically put a map up on the wall and we're like, where do we want to go? Because my wife was ready to take a pause from her job and I was doing some freelance work. And by the way, this is 15 years ago. And we were like, God, there's so many pins on this map. Is that old school, like putting pins on a map? We're like, well, there's just so many places. How are we ever going to do this? And we never realized that there are people who just take trips for 6 months. Like, I don't know. It seems so obvious now, but we just had never, that concept didn't exist until we started researching it, because we thought, how are we ever going to go see all these places if we don't see more than one? How many places can you go on a trip? Oh, people go for a long time. So what was really fascinating was, one, to really cut back on the cost of the trip because we were broke and we didn't have enough savings to do that much. We basically could only travel by land. Like flights within a lot of regions, especially Africa, are super expensive. Well, that just inherently means you have to go slow, because if you want to go from Zambia to Tanzania, the train ride was like 54 hours. It probably would have been an hour flight, or not even an hour, probably like a 30-minute flight. But the Tazara train is there, or at least it was when we were there, and it was a fun experience. What I think we took away from that trip was that so many of the people we met that really shaped the experience, so many of the things we did were not in the major city center. Like, they happened off the beaten path. They happened because we had the time to have a free afternoon. I remember in Syria, like, we were hanging out with someone and he was like, oh, my uncle would love to hear your story. He lived in the United States 25 years ago. And so we were like, great, let's go over. Like, we don't have anything going on this afternoon, because we were just going at whatever pace we wanted. And then he was like, oh, can you spend the night? And my wife spent the night with all of his daughters and his wife, and they had like a girls' night, and I spent the night in like the boys' side of the house. Is kind of a, and then the next day we met his cousin, and we did all these things. When you go on a trip and you're like, we're landing, and here's our itinerary, and today we have these 7 things, and tomorrow we have these 4 things. You just don't leave room for that serendipity. And there's this great conversation I had with Rolf Potts, who wrote a book called Vagabonding. And I believe, if I remember the scenario correctly, we were talking about this person who was sitting at a cafe in Paris and was sitting at this cafe on the side of the street, all these people passing by, and had ordered their food, and the food kind of took a while to get there, and then wanted to pay, and the check took a while to get there. And they were so frustrated that they couldn't leave the restaurant fast enough to go experience what it's like to be a local in Paris. They were like, I'm stuck here trying to pay to go be a local in Paris. And someone was like, literally sitting at a restaurant and having a 1-hour lunch on the sidewalk in Paris, watching people walk by, talking to people that are next to you, doing it at a slow pace. That is being a local in Paris. Like you were trying so hard to jam pack this idea of what you wanted in your day that you missed the fact that you already had the thing you were looking for. And we just saw that so much on that trip in places that you wouldn't get to if you just flew to Frankfurt and had 2 hours before you took a train to Paris, before you took a train to Amsterdam, and you never stopped at any of the places in between. Do I like Paris? Yeah, Paris is awesome. But maybe don't spend 12 hours there. Maybe spend a week there. Maybe come back 3 times. And that second trip to any place ends up always being my favorite trip because you don't have to do all the things. Right? Like the first time you go to Paris, you're like, well, I've got to see the Eiffel Tower. I got to see the Louvre. I've got to go to walk down the Champs-Elysees. Like you've got to do these things. I got to go out to Versailles. And then the second time you're like, well, I did all those things. So maybe we'll go like walk the Marais and like have lunch at a random restaurant that we see that looks interesting. Or maybe we'll lie in the park in the summer and just like eat a sandwich and just, relax and watch people walk by. And you do all these things that seemed crazy to you on your first trip because you weren't maximizing the day, but they make the experience because some local comes and sits next to you and you talk to them for an hour and you learn about their life and then you walk, you go have lunch in their house. Yeah, that might not happen every time, but sitting down at a bar, especially if you're traveling by yourself and just talking to random people, you have some of the most amazing experiences. Can you engineer some of those experiences in a packed schedule? Sure. You can schedule like local tours. You can, hire guides. You can go on free walking tours. If you don't have a lot of time, I still love those things. Like the people you meet on free walking tours are fascinating, interesting. Hiring a guide in a city can be a great way to get to know the local experience through that person while you're doing it. I love going on food tours, but I also love just strolling the local market at the city you're in with no agenda and just seeing what'll happen.
Well said. I feel like the Paris lunch example was just spot on. So spot on.
And if you have kids, I'd encourage people, like the playgrounds are so cool because you take, I remember we were in Paris and I just took my daughter to a playground. Like a playground. She's just running on the swings and like, it's just a bunch of locals whose kids are also running and playing around on the playground. And there was just something so immersive in the French culture and French parenting styles that we got just from being at a park. Well, we weren't at a science museum. We weren't taking a local art class. We were just at a free neighborhood playground.
Pretty much the only memories I remember from like family vacations were me doing that as a kid, just like in the lazy river or in the pool, hanging out with some other kid that I just met that's also staying in the condo. Or it was never the shows that we went to or the museums we visited or things like that. I'm like, I just remember like finally being done with those, being able to run outside, jump into the pool or go to the beach or hang out at the playground. And the random kid that I ended up befriending and being my vacation best friend for 2 days.
Yeah, there's this guy named Derek Sivers, and I don't know what to even call him, a writer, an entrepreneur, a modern philosopher. But I did this interview with him, and it was one of the strangest interviews I've ever done because I usually go into an interview with a topic and a theme. And I was just so fascinated by his writing, and I'd heard him on other shows that I was like, I want to interview him. But I didn't really know where the conversation was going to go. And it was amazing. It was one of my favorite conversations I've had in a long time. And he talked about being, I think, funny enough, in Paris with his son. And he was like, I just let my son, at the time, toddler age, just lead the day. And he's like, my son found a cardboard box and he picked it up and he wanted to like just walk around in the cardboard box. And then he wanted to just go down a street. And it was like, you know, someone who's really type A and like wants to stick to an agenda, it would drive them nuts. But he's like, that day I saw Paris through the eyes of a, let's call it 3-year-old boy, which is not the perspective I've ever had of this city. You know, the things he found fascinating, I would have walked right past. And so I don't know how many people listening have children, but this idea of not only seeing a country, but then re-seeing it through your kids' eyes, right? Like we're taking the kids to Japan next year. Like I've been to Japan a handful of times, but I'm going to go see it through their eyes, which I think is going to be very different.
Well, Chris, let's wrap this conversation up. I'd love to hear about All the Hacks, the podcast, and then your newsletter that you have out there. What can people expect if they go check those two things out?
Yeah. So every week on the podcast, I go deep on something. You know, we talked a lot about travel, points and miles, but I'd say a third of the content is also on money. And then a third of the content is on life. So that could be episodes coming out soon. I just did a deep dive on oral hygiene. I'm looking at a board on the wall that has all these topics that we're working on. I just did one on credit scores. I've gone deep into finance topics, but trying to do the kind of like deep masterclass in an episode. That said, every week there's all kinds of interesting deals and news and finds, even things like cool TV shows. And so every week I try to take all the awesome stuff from the week and put out a newsletter every Saturday morning. That's like a little bit more timely. If you're listening to this podcast, you could just search All the Hacks, find the podcast. And if you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can go to allthehacks.com/email and you'll find it there.
Once again, everybody, this is Chris Hutchins. He is the host and creator of All the Hacks. Chris, this was a blast. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Chris really knows his stuff. I learned so much about travel hacking while preparing for this episode. I'm still in the beginner stage of travel hacking, and I'm not sure I'll dive too deep into it, but there is a lot of low-hanging fruit that can make travel way more affordable. I especially love the non-credit card tips, like calling up the hotel directly or using Google reverse image search to find the same property for cheaper on a different booking site. Like that's genius, and those are easy wins. But what about you? Where do you stand on travel hacking, especially when it comes to credit card point optimization? Does it feel totally overwhelming, or is it more a fun game to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts along with your upcoming travel destination. Send me an email at justin@fiminded.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.